Alright, my name's Cameron Cantley.
And my name is Dean Carruthers.
So, in the introduction, the two chapters we were tasked with reading and giving our response on were over building heights and area limitations, which is chapter 5, and types of construction, which is chapter 6. These two topics were very interesting to learn more in depth about and explore different ways of learning the specifics about what the charts mean. In further slides, we will be breaking down each chapter and we will discuss what the charts mean and how to use them in a real world scenario. But first, we will be looking at some key terms and important abbreviations that we should know for future reference. So, in Chapter 5, some key terms / abbreviations. A mezzanine is an intermediate floor level which is placed between two larger floor plates. So, in further slides, we'll see that a mezzanine cannot take up more than 1/3 of the entire building area. So, building area is usually considered to exclude the thickness of the exterior walls of a building. Therefore, the building area is the area enclosed inside the building, and the area begins at the inside face of the exterior walls. Building heights, the vertical distance from the grade plane to the average height of the highest roof surface. Story height, which is a story above a grade plane. It is measured as the vertical distance from the top of one finished floor to the top of the next successive finished floor. Grade plane, which is a reference plane representing the average grade levels along the exterior walls of the building. So some abbreviations we'll see when we're looking at these charts are, if we see an NS, that means it's a non-sprinkled or building is not equipped with an automatic sprinkler system. So S is this building is equipped with a automatic sprinkler system and is in accordance with 903.3.11. S1, building a maximum of one story above grade plane and equipped with an automatic sprinkler system installed in accordance with 903.3.11. SM, building two or more stories above grade plane equipped throughout with an automatic sprinkler system. And then S13R, building equipped throughout with an automatic sprinkler system. So Chapter 5 overview, there are 5 main charts we'll be breaking down in Chapter 5. 504.3, allowable building height in feet above grade plane. 504.4, allowable number of stories above grade plane. 506.2, allowable area factor. And 508.4, required separation of occupancies. Table 509, incidental uses. These 6 topics are what we will break down and give our focus to, but there are a few other topics we will briefly describe, for example, unlimited area buildings, mezzanines, and equipment platforms. So when looking at allowable building heights, this is breaking down table 504.3 and 504.4. In 504.3, there's factors in construction type, types of occupancy, and the type of sprinkler system a building has, and we allow us to see the allowable building height per code. So like I said, there are 2 main tables regarding allowable building height, with the main difference in them being that they're the way they are measured. So in table 504.3, we can see that the allowable building height is measured in feet above the grade plane and is directly related to the fire resistance rather than the occupancy. Where table 504.4 measures heights as stories and is directly related to the type of occupancy that the building has and falls under. In general, when looking at these charts, we can break them down and understand what they mean. So when we look at most type A buildings, that's going to be the first ones we see in a chart. These are going to be the higher resistance, so we'll be able to have more fire and life safety on these. So we'll have more leeway with these, or unlimited area, as you'll see. When using the term degree of hazard, we can relate the building types and fire resistance, and this will allow us to see the higher the level of fire and life safety. And this will show the larger the building can be.
So for table 504.3, when looking at tables 504.3, there are some key things we need to break down to determine the allowable building heights. The first being different occupancy classifications, whether that be A, B, E, etc., and many more. When determining this, we can see what part of the chart we need to focus on. The next step is to determine whether the building is going to be equipped with an automatic sprinkler system or not. And lastly, the type of construction. After doing all this, we can locate the allowable building height in feet. So for an example, we want to know the allowable building height for occupancy group A, type 2A construction, non-sprinkled. So the answer would be the allowable building height is 65 feet above the grade plane. For table 504.4, we can break this table down by the same steps as table 504.3, but with one difference being made. When we express the allowable building height, we do so by stories above grade plane, not feet. So an example of this is we want to know the allowable building height for occupancy group A1, type A2 construction, non-sprinkled. And so we can have 3 stories above the grade plane in this scenario. And these tables can be important because they can quickly show the allowable building height by code that we can design and execute the process of a project. So section 505 is about mezzanines. There are many guidelines to follow when inserting a mezzanine into a new or existing building. When looking at a mezzanine, it should be considered a portion of the story below. It should never be considered into the building area or the number of stories in a building, but they are included when determining the fire area. The height should never be less than 7 feet or greater than 10 feet. For the area limitation, the total area of the mezzanine shall never be greater than 1/3 of the total floor area for the entire building, and it will not be calculated into the total floor area of a building.
So section 505.3, we're going to look at equipment platforms. As the same as mezzanines, equipment platforms shall not be considered as a portion of the floor below. They also do not contribute to the building area or the number of stories in a building. Different from a mezzanine, the area equipment platform shall not be calculated when determining the fire area. So when we look at a mezzanine, we are calculating in the fire area, but we are not in an equipment platform. Equipment platforms shall never be connected to a mezzanine in any way. And the area limitation, the area of the equipment platform shall not exceed 2/3 of the area of the room that it is located in. So like I said, when we're looking at mezzanines, they're 1/3, equipment platforms are 2/3, so they got differences in them. Table 506.3, we're going to look at the allowable area factor, and this determines the floor area based on construction type, occupancy classification, and the amount of building frontage on a public way or open space. The area in this chart is determined by square footage, or determined in square footage. So we can determine the allowable area in the same way as we did allowable building heights. We first determine the occupancy classification, then we look at the type of construction, whether it is non-sprinkled or sprinkled. So if we're looking at this chart right now, we can break it down. For an example, if we have occupancy A1, type of construction is type 2A, non-sprinkled, we're going to go over, look, and we'll go to type 2 construction, go to A. First thing down is A1. We're going to find 15,500 square feet is our allowable area for this building. So section 506 is building areas. This is going to be where we can calculate the allowable area in square feet as we did on the chart. And we can take this and it's going to show us our tabular area front factor. And the area factor increase due to frontage. So we can calculate all these things and understand what the building area is allowed to be in regards to other buildings. So a single occupancy 1-story building shall be calculated by equation 501. Single occupancy multi-story building shall be calculated by 5.2. Multi-occupancy multi-story building shall be calculated by equation 5.3. So this is the same thing continued. Frontage increase shall be determined by equation 5.5 as we see in the picture. Minimum frontage distance shall be a minimum distance of 20 feet will be the minimum to qualify for area increase based on the frontage of the public way or open space adjacent to the building perimeter. I will now.
So for table 508.4, the table helps show the different occupancy classifications and how they need to be separated with fire barriers. So this table 508.4 is measured in hours. And so we can relate the occupancy classifications on both the X and Y axis and determine if the buildings are sprinkled or non-sprinkled. We can then determine the number of hours for fire separation that acts as fire barriers for each building. So, for example, Group A, if we're trying to find Group A occupancy related to Group S2, non-sprinkled, if you look at the chart, it would take an hour of separation for that. So Table 509, incident issues. So Table 509 helps describe different incidental uses or equipment located within a building and tells us the fire barrier and in hours how long the fire separation shall be. The area limitation of an incidental use shall not occupy more than 10% of the building's total area. The table helps shows an automatic sprinkler system without the use of a fire barrier, and incidental uses will not be classified as individual. It will be included in the building's occupancy where it is located in the building. And then now we'll talk about how to read the chart a little bit. And actually, so Chapter 6 explains the different types of construction. The IBC classifies all buildings into 5 broad categories based on the fire-resistant capabilities of the predominant materials used for their construction. These 5 types of construction are classified as type 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. While there are 5 types of construction, there are also 2 different categories that these construction types fall into, and those are A or B, or the groups or occupancies also help categorize these types of construction based on what the building is being used for. So all in all, the 2 main traits that divide these construction types are if the materials are made out of non-combustible or combustible materials. And then there's 2 types of materials, so non-combustible materials. These are defined as materials of which no part will ignite and burn when subject to fire. Due to the IBC, in order for a material to be deemed non-combustible, it has to go through a series of tests done by the ASTM that will show if it can be considered non-combustible. Some examples of non-combustible can be things such as brick, concrete, glass, and aluminum. Going off that, there's also combustible materials. These will be defined as materials made of or surfaced with wood, compressed paper, plant fibers, or other material that will ignite and burn. So some examples of that can be like wood, plastics, etc. On your residential construction sites, they're usually made of combustible materials, but when you get to your larger commercial job sites, they're usually made with non-combustible materials.
Alright, so the first graph we're going to look at is construction type graphs. The graph helps show the specifics of the 5 types of construction. So when we break this down, we can see building elements. So this is the different types of wood we're going to see, or different types of framing we're going to see in structures, and it breaks it down by the different types of categories of construction types. And then, so type 1 and 2 are very similar. They're both made out of materials such as concrete, brick, etc. These materials are non-combustible. So type 3 construction is made to where the outside of the building has to be made of non-combustible materials, but the inside of the building can be made out of non-fire rated materials. Type 1V or 4 is classified as a heavy timber type of construction. This type of timber can be considered combustible. Type 5 is made out of fully combustible material. So when we're looking at this chart, we can, as we said, we can look at the different types of construction, and it's all rated in hours, so the fire rating hours. And Table 602 is fire resistant rating requirements for exterior walls. So when X is considered the distance between each building, the chart will determine the type of construction and occupancy group. So if the fire separation distance between 2 buildings is 5 feet or less, we can look at the type of construction. We can have all types of construction. The occupancy group, we can have 3, and so on. And it grows up from 5 to 10, 10 to 30, and 30 and more. Table 602 is wood member sizes. So columns shall be sewn, glued, or laminated and shall not be less than 8 inches nominal in any dimension when supporting floor loads, and not less than 6 inches. Columns shall be continuous or superimposed and connected in an improved manner. Using combustible material. So when we're using combustible material, we can add a lot of different things to the project you're working on. For example, if your type of construction is going to be type 3, 4, and 5, you'll need to make sure that you have things such as a sprinkler system, smoke detectors, or even more exit pathways that you can use in a building that is non-combustible. Some buildings are created to where if a fire does happen, the building can help reduce the area that the fire spreads to. For example, some buildings use more extreme fire precautions on the second floor of a building, This is done so if a fire was to happen, it wouldn't be able to spread up like it normally would. So type 1, 2A, type 1, 2B. So type 1A construction provides the highest level of fire resistant rating construction. It requires passive protection for all elements of the structure. So any kind of fire separation that we're looking at through any of these charts in Chapter 5 or Chapter 6, as I said earlier, type A is always going to be your highest level of fire resistance, and it shows that in the charts. Type 1B construction is similar to Type 1A construction, but permits a 1 hour reduction in fire resistant rating for structural frames, bearing walls, and floor construction. It also has a half-hour reduction for roof construction. Type 2A construction requires passive protection for all elements of the structure. Type 2B construction allows unprotected, non-combustible material elements. This type of construction was described as Type 2 non-rated in some previous model codes. These are our references. We got some stuff off UpCodes, but most of it came off the manual that we were assigned to conduct this project with. Thank you.
Thank you.